Call the meeting on Standing Committee on Economic Development and Environment to order. I'm Jackie Jacobson, MLA for Nunavut, Chair of the committee. Today I'll receive a public technical briefing with the Deputy Minister of Environment, Natural Resources, Mr. Dr. Aaron Kelly, and staff statement, environmental values. Today's public meeting is being live streamed on the Assembly social media. I'd like to remind the members and presenters to direct the questions and comments to myself as the chair and wait to be recognized before speaking. This will help our meeting run a lot smoother. As I'll now ask members to introduce themselves for the record. Mr. Johnson.
Good morning, Ryland Johnson, MLA for Yellowknife North.
Ron Bonadrus, Decho. Kevin O'Reilly, Frame Lake.
Katrina Knockleby, Great Slave.
Richard Ajerga, Antonio.
Thank you, members. Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Kelly. Please introduce yourself and staff to proceed your opening remarks in your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. We'd like to thank you for the opportunity today to provide the committee with information on the Statement of Environmental Values. With me today, I have the Director of Policy, Legislation and Communications at ENR, Natasha Hunter. The Environmental Rights Act, as amended in 2019, requires Executive Council to develop a Statement of Environmental Values. The statement explains how environmental considerations, including the right to a healthy environment, will be integrated into decisions that might have a significant impact on the environment. The statement applies to decisions made by all GNWT departments, as well as Aurora College, BDIC, NTPC, and Housing NWT. ENR provided notice to the public of a 90-day period to provide comments in November of 2021. ENR addressed the comments and the statement was finalized in mid-May, and the statement was tabled June 3rd of 2022. I will now turn it over with the Chair's permission to Natasha Hunter to go through a short presentation to provide more details on the development of the final statement and how we incorporated feedback received through public engagement.
You, Dr. Kelly, Ms. Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. This presentation will provide an overview of the Statement of Environmental Values. Next slide. The Environmental Rights Act was amended and came into force in 2019. The Act provides an overarching commitment to ensure a healthy environment for residents and provides residents with tools to ensure these rights are protected. Section 17 of the Act requires the development of a Statement of Environmental Values that sets out how environmental considerations will be integrated into decisions that may have a significant impact on the environment. The SEV applies to decisions made by the GNWT and not to decisions made by parties other than the GNWT. The Act stipulates a 90-day public engagement period where residents have a chance to offer their comments on the draft statement, followed by the requirement for the GNWT to finalize the statement within 150 days of the public engagement ending. The Act also indicates that the statement applies to all GNWT departments, the NTPC, BDIC, Housing NWT, and Aurora College when making decisions. The Government of Ontario is currently the only other jurisdiction in Canada that has developed SEVs that applies to decisions their government makes that may affect the environment. Next slide. In respect to the process to date, in 2021, ENR led the development of the Statement of Environmental Values, working with all GNWT departments and applicable agencies to incorporate internal feedback and suggestions for the statement. Executive Council approved the statement as it is an Executive Council statement of policy and directed ENR to proceed with public engagement. As Dr. Kelly mentioned, the public had 90 days to provide comments starting November 10th, 2021. The GNWT then had 150 days to address comments, create a What We Heard report, and finalize the SCV. This work was again led by ENR. SCEDI was provided with the opportunity to review and comment on the SCV, consistent with the Process Convention on Standing Committee Review of Proposed Policy and Implementation Plans. ENR did not receive any comments from SCEDI by the requested deadline. And on May 12th, a copy of the final, along with the What We Heard report, was provided to SCEDI. The statement was then tabled on June 3rd, 2022, and was launched publicly on June 7th through a news release and social media posts. Public feedback included 32 recommended changes from 3 organizations: Alternatives North in partnership with Ecology North, NWT Association of Landscape Architects, and Acho Deneke Quay First Nation, and 2 comments from private residents of the NWT. Overall, responses were favorable, although some felt the SCV could benefit from additions to further protect the environment. From a GNWT perspective, the SCV is only one part of a suite of tools that the GNWT uses to make decisions. General feedback on the implementation, monitoring, and reporting went farther than what the Environmental Rights Act sets out as the scope and application of the SCV, but many of the recommendations are addressed and implemented as GNWT's general course of business. Additions to the SCV, such as the suggested greening of the GNWT or creating an environmental registry, were not added to the SCV at this time. Environmental information is already publicly available through several registries. In addition, there is currently no provision in the Environmental Rights Act that would provide the legal authority to create an environmental registry. However, we did strengthen language around engagement and ensuring Indigenous interests are meaningfully considered in GNWT decision-making. As far as next steps, the GNWT will take every reasonable step to ensure that the SCV is considered when decisions are being made that could significantly impact the environment. As far as ongoing implementation, as per the statement, the Deputy Minister of Environment and Natural Resources will be responsible for coordinating the administration and government-wide implementation of this statement and monitoring advancements in environmental principles and best practices, and periodically reviewing the statement to inform recommended amendments from time to time. Thank you.
Ms. Hunter, for that presentation. Now I'll allow members if they have any questions in regards to the presentation or for Dr. Kelly or the staff. Members, Mr. O'Reilly.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the presentation. I just want to start with the availability of information about the Statement of Environmental Values. I was on the ENR website last night and this morning, and I can find a sort of like a semi-final version. It's not signed, it's not dated. The What We Heard report is not on the ENR website. I know that these 2 documents were tabled in the House, but for anybody, that was hoping that they could see these somewhere, they're not easy documents to find. Is there some way that the department can make these a little more available on the ENR website? Maybe have a page about the Environmental Rights Act, Statement of Environmental Values? Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. O'Reilly. Dr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have a page on the Environmental Rights Act. We recognize what the member is putting forward, and we have a communications implementation plan for the Statement of Environmental Values that has been developed, and it highlights the importance of this initiative and how it fits into GNWT's overall approach to decision-making using social and traditional media advertising. So there was a media release, and the Statement of Environmental Values has been posted on the ENR website. It's not common practice to put the signed version on, but it is on there. And we have in our rotation of Facebook and Twitter, we do have posts that are on the Statement of Environmental Values to try to get people to be aware of that. We'll certainly take it back to look at if there's other opportunities to increase its prominence on the webpage. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Mr. O'Reilly.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think this stuff should be available in one place, easily findable, and it should be on the ENR website. Can the Deputy Minister commit to share a copy of this communications plan with the committee on a confidential basis if necessary? Because there was a number of commitments that were made around even just trying to promote the Environmental Rights Act, the ability to request investigations and so on. And at one point, I think there was a little pamphlet, but I'm really interested in seeing the overall effort to try to promote this a little bit better. So can the Deputy Minister commit to share that plan with us? Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. O'Reilly. Dr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarity, this is on the ENR website now, and we can look to increase its prominence, and we're happy to share a summary of the approach that we're using to try to increase the awareness of this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Ms. Knockleby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a good thing. I'm kind of always more about like the action of stuff versus sort of the higher, you know, as I like to kind of call it, a little bit more airy-fairy or high-arching stuff. So I guess my question is, how does the statement of environmental values play into the climate lens piece that is being used by FMB, excuse me, and Cabinet during the decision-making process? And I guess, can the department speak a little bit about how that will sort of play together going forward, as the statement is a living document that's going to evolve and change? You know, how does that impact the FMB climate lens analysis? Thank you.
Ms. Knockleby. Dr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the member mentioned, that we have, as part of its the mandate commitments, already added climate change considerations to Cabinet and FMB decision-making instruments, and the statement of environmental values is intended to be broader than focusing specifically on climate change. So it was determined that the addition of climate change to the SEV was not necessary because of other work that we're doing on climate change, and it encompasses it already, right? It's a broader piece. With respect, you know, it is the responsibility of each minister from the departments and organizations that we've already mentioned, and the deputies within those, there's specific requirements in the statement of environmental values. Really what we're looking for is an opportunity to spend some time implementing this, and we know that there will be improvements that we can make. So there were many comments that were made that we were unable to put in at this time. Some of them are because we're already doing that work in other ways, but there are others that, as this evolves, we'll certainly keep in mind for the future. But at this point, the SEV is the broader document that's related to decision making, and the climate change piece is quite specific. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Ms. Knockleby.
Yeah, thank you for that, and I appreciate the want to not duplicate work and create like sort of redundancy in many documents that if one gets changed, you have to then go and change the other. So I guess I'll just wait and see how this gets implemented, because again, I sometimes struggle with getting the high level to actually come down into the departments and be sort of becoming that philosophy of the department, which is kind of what I think these types of statements are meant to do. So I wish the department good luck, because it's very hard to change. I think sometimes governments, ways they do business. So I don't really have any question in that, but just more of a comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Knockleby. Any other questions for Dr. Kelly or Ms. Hunter regarding to the technical briefing? Mr. O'Reilly.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So I guess I got two or three other areas I want to pursue here a little bit. The presentation and the policy itself, or I should say the statement, is a little bit lean in terms of implementation and really accountability. You know, when I look at the policy, or sorry, the statement, it basically says that the Premier is accountable to the Executive Council and the residents of the NWT for implementation of this statement. And in September, I had an opportunity to ask the Premier, the Minister of Finance, and the Minister of ENR, all who's really responsible for implementation of this and tracking and reporting and so on, and nobody actually knew. So, and there's really nothing in the statement itself that requires any kind of public reporting, tracking of this. It does say the Deputy Minister is responsible for of ENR is responsible for coordination, but on all of these issues were raised by myself in the 18th Assembly when the bill was drafted, and it was reviewed by this committee. The committee made recommendations about these matters. They was ignored by the minister, and those same comments were repeated again in the public comments that were submitted. And there's nothing in here about reporting, tracking, really implementation. How is this actually going to happen? Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Riley. Dr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The SEV sets out specific responsibilities of the Deputy Minister, and in particular for the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, to coordinate the administration and implementation of the Statement of Environmental Values. to monitor advancements in best practices, and to periodically review the Statement of Environmental Values. At this time, there is no annual report requirement in the ERA, and I would definitely speak to the fact here that we need some time with this implementation to understand the best way for some of this tracking to occur. So it's the responsibility within each department to do so. And then it's our job to work with others to pull that information together. And it's quite new. I think that, and I'm hopeful that this is one of the things that we can look at in when we periodically review the SEV the next time. But right now, we're trying to get it implemented and working and figure out the best way to track this information. I think the real challenge, to be honest, is the balance between action and being able to do the work that we need to do, and being able to make sure that we're doing what we need to under things like the Statement of Environmental Values, and we're trying to balance that at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good, Dr. Kelly. Mr. O'Reilly?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and if I sound a little frustrated, it's not directed at the staff. I think this requires leadership at the political level, but you know, the Environmental Rights Act was reviewed once in 29 years. I don't think it's going to be reviewed again in my lifetime, and that was an opportunity to make some significant improvements. A few were made, but not enough, particularly in terms of tracking and reporting and so on. But you know, this is totally discretionary policy. There's no consequences if it's not followed. There's no requirement that it actually be followed. And I just contrast this with you know, the way that we're approaching the climate change stuff. I'm not all that happy with that, but at least Cabinet now has a requirement that in memos and decision papers that go to Cabinet, there's a section in there that requires some statement about how the effects of government policies, changes, and programs and services, the implications for climate change. Why are we not doing the same thing with this Statement of Environmental Values and having a piece in the Cabinet decision papers that says, you know, these principles are in the Statement of Environmental Values. Here's how they were considered in a decision that's made by Cabinet. So we've got a template for doing that. It also happens with gender-based analysis. That's now a lens that Cabinet uses for making decisions. I would have thought or expected that the Statement of Environmental Values would be implemented in a similar manner, but there's nothing in the statement about this, even though it was raised by NGOs, it was raised by me. So how is this really going to get implemented and reported on? Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. O'Reilly. Dr. Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll just make sure that it's clear to everyone that the Statement of Environmental Values itself has a periodic review clause that is incorporated in it. So there's a commitment to periodically review the statement, and we are committed to doing that. I think it also needs to be clear that the Statement of Environmental Values applies to decision-making broader than just Cabinet decision-making. So we're working to find ways within departments and then among departments, because this is new. And by among departments, I mean that's one of the roles of ENR, right? Is to coordinate the administration and implementation of the Statement of Environmental Values and monitor advancements in best practices. We have to find those ways of doing it, but it's not just about Cabinet decisions. It's about making sure that environmental values are considered in multiple decisions across government. This is a big thing, and there's only one other jurisdiction in Canada that's doing it, and that jurisdiction is Ontario, and they have far more resources than the government of the Northwest Territories. So again, we need to find ways to do this, and we're committed to doing it, but we need to find ways to do it that work in the Northwest Territories, and we are actively working to achieve that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Next on the list, I have Ms. Jane Whalen Armstrong.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Environmental issues. I know that environmental issue is very important for the Indigenous people, especially now with the climate change and global warming that's happening around the world. And even here, you know, So whatever is happening here with the climate change and global warming, we know that that is going to have a great impact on our people and on our livelihood as well. So I just wanted to ask if you provided here the public feedback, who you contacted or who provided feedback, and what we heard report, and it says recognizing Indigenous knowledge and the right of Indigenous people. You recognize, okay. I just wanted to know if Klitschko government were consulted on this. Did they provide their feedback? Because and I know they have a lot of concerns because a lot of these things does coincide with their land claims agreement, because we do have this provision in our agreement as well. So I just want to know if Klitschko government, were consulted and provided any feedback to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Whalen Armstrong. Dr. Kelly?
Mr. Chair, so letters were sent out to Indigenous governments, including the Klitschko government and other interested parties, as well as there was public engagement that was on our website and in the news. We paid for advertisements to get people to provide input so that they knew there was an opportunity to provide input into this. We didn't get a response from Klitschko government.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kelly. Ms. Whalen Armstrong?
Like I said, this is a very important issue for everybody. So did you guys reach out to them again and to see if they to ask for their feedback, or you're just going ahead with just on your own on this area? Because environmental, like I said, it's very important for everybody here in the north. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. But if you'd like to reply, Dr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We agree that this is an important issue for everyone, which is why we sent out letters to all Indigenous governments asking for comments back within 90 days. And then we had a publicly, with media attention on this, to encourage all residents to provide input into this process. And there was input that was provided, and it was considered, and where it could be incorporated, we incorporated it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Next on this, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start just by making a few comments. I think the Statement of Environmental Values is great work. I think I appreciate the feedback that you incorporated. I think it says something that we're here at this table having a conversation about how we're going to implement this, and not whether we're accepting what are a lot of the best practices, what are global leading of what environmental values should be. So I want to thank the department and the political leadership that we've shown to this on date. I recognize this is step one. You create a high-level document, and we try to get agreement across the GNWT that these are our values, and then slowly it trickles into government decision making. And I guess I wanted to just comment on my hesitancy to ask for reporting of this and ask ENR for any more reporting. I believe that ENR by far reports on things more than any other department, probably more than all the other departments combined. And so I'll frame that into a question of whether the Deputy Minister has some sort of tracking of how much reporting we are asking the department to currently do, or whether that is something that's under review, because it seems to me we could, we have our environmental reporting, we have our climate change reporting. It seems to me that we could roll a lot of it into 1 or 2 annual reports a year, not the 45 or so that I see. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Dr. Kelly.
Chair. Several members have brought forward the importance of the work that we do for the residents of the Northwest Territories, in particular for Indigenous residents of the Northwest Territories, and that leads to a number of public reporting requirements, and we understand why that is, but I will tell you that just yesterday we were talking about and we've compiled a list of all of the public reporting requirements that we have, and it's extensive, and we're looking at ways to streamline that reporting so we can still get that information out to the public, but it's in a way that's more easily accessible by the public and a way that's easier for folks to do it. I mentioned earlier, we want to balance the important work of reporting on what we're doing with the very important work of also doing that work, right? That didn't come out very well, but I think you know what I meant. We need to do the work and then report on it, and it's a real balance to make sure that we're not spending so much time on reporting that we're not be able to get some of the really important work done that we need to. So the department is looking at all of the reporting requirements and trying to figure out, for example, if there's a way that we can do it better online. And that would be less work for folks to do it, but would make it even more accessible to the public to see the results of, the reporting results. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad to hear that because I think ENR, we've funded, successfully gone out and got climate change funding for a number of new positions. They're adding new positions. It's great work. But I think it's very disheartening to staff if your job is not to actually do anything about climate change. It's just to report on it and just report that, our environment is getting worse and the climate change is getting worse year after year. We're not going to be able to retain people unless we give them room to actually do work. And I view, the increasing number of monitoring reporting as opposed to implementing some of the great action plans we have that do cost money, and we're working on that. But I guess to frame that in a question is, I'm wondering if the minister would be willing to share with committee some sort of version of that work that they did of analyzing all the reports they have. I'm just curious, what that looks like. I see them come out of ENR and I try to read them. No way I could possibly keep up, but if there is a list of everything that you have to report on annually, that would be appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Johnson, Dr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We can provide a summary. We're still working on it, so it'll be a little while before we get it finalized, but we can certainly provide a summary of that. We recognize the importance of people getting the information and not just doing things for the sake of doing them. That's not our interest, but we also, as the member mentioned, want to be able to focus on doing the work with communities to address their concerns and the needs that they have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Anything else to add there, Mr. Johnson? Just a comment too, Dr. Kelly. The biggest, I think, the stuff that we deal with in the Nutput and my leadership, I hear from when we're talking about people coming in and doing reports and doing studies and stuff like that, the reports and the study, that the information that they collect, the data doesn't get back to the community. And that's one of the biggest problems that we're having. And now it's for some of the leadership that we do have, they, why are you wasting our time if you're not going to share the information that you're taking from us, from our communities, that they represent? So I think something like that's got to be looked at, not only from the outside, the scientists that are coming in, but from our GNWT. I mean, the information's got to flow to the communities, it's got to flow to the members to provide service for the people that we represent. So that's another way to look at it too. So it's a comment, but if you want to reply to that, please do so. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'd love an opportunity to speak to that. There's a number of things that ENR has been working on for at least the time that I've been at the department related to that. When I first started at the department, I was going into communities and doing some of the work with communities at that time, and I heard that comment repeatedly. We have the Cumulative Impact Monitoring Program, who's doing community workshops where they're going out into the communities with the researchers. We've worked on plain language summaries and what questions communities have, because researchers think about their research in a different way than communities do, and trying to ensure that information going back to the communities is in a way that they can use and understand, because just getting a scientific report isn't helpful, right? So there's a number of ways, but we can always improve on that, and we thank you for your comments.
Members, any other questions for Dr. Kelly and Ms. Hunter? Mr. O'Reilly.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just don't want anyone to go away to think that I don't appreciate the work that the department does, but I want to give them some credit for dealing with the issue of significance in the statement. This was something I tried to get amended and incorporated into the bill itself in the last assembly, but this statement of environmental values only applies to decisions that may have a significant impact on the environment made by GNWT departments and agencies. So only those that have significant impact. The problem was there was no definition of significant impact in relation to what decisions this really applied to. But in the statement, you've actually referenced subsection 921 of the Environmental Rights Act. I helped get that into the act in the last assembly, drawing on some work that the review board had done. So I want to give you credit for incorporating that. It would be better if it was actually in the legislation itself, but that I think will help with the interpretation of this. But I just want to address a couple points that the Deputy Minister made. The requirement to periodically review this statement, that's good, but there's no timeline for that. Others have suggested that there should have been some kind of timeline incorporated into this. It wasn't, so it's at the discretion, I guess, of the Deputy Minister, although they're accountable for this. On the issue of reporting, you know, you do have an Environmental Rights Act annual report. The most recent one is 3 pages in English and French. This is an opportunity to report on the implementation of the Statement of Environmental Values. I tried to get that into the bill last time around. People suggested it should be incorporated into the statement. So you already do some reporting on the Environmental Rights Act. And I think it's not that much of a stretch to have a paragraph or 2 in this annual report that talks about how you're going to implement this. Now, Mr. Chair, I just want to turn to something more practical about how you actually implement it. What we need is a set of guidelines so that departments, deputy ministers, you know, managers in those departments actually know how to implement this. And you know, these are the kinds of decisions that you need to apply this to. And here's the significance criteria, and here's some examples of decisions this should apply to, and here's how you can actually go about doing it. Whether it's a checklist form or whatever, it's not rocket science. And I think that work can and should have been done as part of the statement, but and it was suggested by me in the last assembly, it was suggested by those that commented during your public engagement, but now that we're here, can the Deputy Minister say whether you're working on a set of guidelines so that the departments know, and Deputy Ministers in those departments know how to actually implement and apply this Statement of Environmental Values? Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Dr. Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the report that the member is speaking to, the commitment in the Act is to report on investigations, and that's why the report is not very long, because it's specific to investigations. I think what I'll say about reporting and guidance is we intend to implement the Statement of Environmental Values and make adjustments as we need to, and have the discussions about how this will work. We know that we need to meet the commitments that are in it, and the way that we do that, it will emerge as we continue to implement it, and we'll certainly take back the members' comments on reporting and on guideline development as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Mr. O'Reilly, anything else to add?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'll try to be constructive here. I think the department needs more resources. And I've said this, I've gone on record many times as saying this, and I know that you're trying to find the right balance between reporting and doing and studying and all of that. But if the department needs more resources to communicate more effectively what it's actually doing, needs more resources to get the work done that's required in legislation and through the mandate commitments and so on, I'm more than happy to support it. And I don't think the department has the resources that it's necessary to do all the work that it can and should be doing. And that's not to say that the staff are not working hard, because I fully appreciate the work that all of you folks do. You just need more resources to do the work. Come and ask for it, and I'll vote in favor of it. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
You, Mr. O'Reilly. Dr. Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we just need to remember that this statement applies to decisions made by all GNWT departments, as well as Aurora College, BDIC, NTPC, and Housing NWT. This is a big undertaking. It's not just ENR that needs to be involved in these, in how this will work and implementation. It is ENR's role to coordinate and work with other departments on this, and we take that role seriously. But we need some time And we've heard the members' comments on reporting and on guidance, and we'll definitely consider those in working with the other departments on it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Anybody, any other members have any questions for Dr. Kelly or Ms. Hunter in regards to the briefing? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Dr. Kelly and Ms. Hunter, for your briefing today, and we look forward to the information that we have coming forward to the committee. And like Mr. Riley said, we're here to help you guys, and volunteer Mr. Riley. But no, he's a good resource. He's a really, really good resource, and I know he wants the best for our territory. So, okay, thank you very much. This concludes our public briefing on move to go into camera, Miss Knockleby. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, have a good day.